With the Ram Mandir a certainty now, there is little else on people's minds. It's Jai Shri Ram all the way. Namaste and welcome to our show. Joining me today is Dr. Subhash Kak, who has been on our show before and needs no introduction. He's a scientist, an academic, author whose expertise ranges from physics, computer technology, astronomy to the Vedas and other subjects besides. Welcome back, Subhashji, Jai Shri Ram, and delighted to have you back with us.
Jai Shri Ram, very happy to be on this episode talking about really very interesting things.
So let's jump right into it and start talking about Ram Mandir because that is what everybody is, at least in India right now in Bharat. There's a lot of that's all that everybody is talking about in the news, especially. So uh, you may be aware. I'm sure you know that the Murti has been unveiled and everyone is talking about the Murti. It's a 51-inch Murti of a young Bhagwan Ram. So, what can you tell us about the idol itself?
What I've been told is that the sculptor is a guy from Mysuru. His name is Arun Yogiraj, and he has
Yes.
done some very important commissions before as well. And the Murti is the 5-year-old Ram, and wonderful, because really this is a rebirth in many different ways of this extraordinary civilization of ours.
That's right. And anything else that you know about the Murti? Like, what is it made of, or is it? I mean, any significance of the material that is used, or anything?
I believe it's a very ancient rock, billions of years old. So it was chosen both for its quality and its age, and I don't know many more details,
Right, right.
but clearly a lot of thought was given to what
Thought
kind of
of.
a rock to use for the murti.
There is also a lot of talk about, there has been, at least in Bharat, if you've been following the news, about the Pran Pratishtha, so of the Murti itself. And our Prime Minister Modi ji has been undergoing some, like penance of some sort, like in the sense that he's the austerities that he's undertaking in order to prepare himself for the role of doing the Pran Pratishtha. What are your thoughts about this? Because as you are aware, in the Hindu Dharma, uh, there is no one linear way of doing things. So there are always very many different strands of uh, thoughts, ideas, belief systems, traditions. So naturally, there's a lot of there are there's some sort of conflict going on in people's minds about, well, is this the right way or that? So without maybe getting into the politics of it, what is the importance of Prana Pratishtha, and what are your thoughts on what is proposed to be done, going to be proposed to be done in this particular case?
I believe the criticism is that the temple is not yet ready. But I think that is really irrelevant because if you look at the inauguration or the Pran Pratishtha at the Somnath Mandir, which was done by Rajendra Prasad, I believe in 1953, the mandir
Yes.
was not ready at that time either. And it took another 3 years for it to be fully done. So I think that is irrelevant. And I think you made a wonderful point related to how Prana Pratishtha, first of all, is not necessarily to be viewed in linear time, that is the mandir ready and so on, because where scholars and many people who write for magazines and newspapers go wrong is they're looking at these extraordinarily subtle ideas from Bharat through the Western linear time lens. And that is not the case at all. And the reason why that is uh, because Sanatan Dharma is, of course, the linear physical history that all of us are a part of, but it's also a part of the Atma, which is beyond time. And
Yeah.
that's what brings in this idea of infinity, which is so centrally defined within the Indian tradition. And Ram, plays an extremely important role here. Ram, you have Maryada Purushottam Ram as the ideal king. So
Yes.
Ram also represents the ideal state. If you look at what's going on in the West right now, you see unraveling in many different ways culturally of the United States. Huge
Mm.
fight about what is to be done, how is to be lived, whether a man is a male or a female, or whether a woman is a male
The
or a female, or
fundamental
whatever.
questions.
Yes, so many things. The people are lost because in the West, unlike India, in India, in Bharat, you had four purusharthas, right? Dharma, artha, kama,
Calm,
and
right.
moksha. Moksha is what is missing in the West. Moksha
Mm.
is about sacrifice. Moksha is about guardrails. It's about maryadas. See, in the West, you don't have this idea of maryadas. Now, of course, in the West also, for a long time, you had the idea of honor, which is a wonderful thing. But sadly, in the post industrial or post modern age, people have become so mechanically oriented that the idea of honor is sort of looked down upon pejoratively. And that's a huge mistake that the West is making. Now, in India, in Bharat, we have always been aware of the centrality of Maryada. And Ram represents the pratik. He's the pratik. He's the symbol of it. In fact,
That's
and so Ram represents that middle ground, which gives validity to the king, to the state. And in fact, even in the great Vijayanagar city, the Ramachandra temple straddle the sacred space and the secular
secular.
space, the state space. And therefore, Ram, in the imagination of people from Bharat, represents a very special space. I can even tell you about my father. My father, when he studied in Lahore, a long time ago,
Wow.
and when we were growing up, we saw that on his arm was inscribed R.O. So we asked him, "What is R.O?" And there were no other tattoos. There was all that there was on his hand, on his arm, and he says and his name was Ramnath. So
Okay.
R.O stands for Rama's own. That he,
Rama's own.
Rama's own, OWN, that he in his childhood or in his teenager years or later had decided, had chosen the path of the ideal king or the
Rama.
ideal person. And that's where Ram is absolutely important. People don't quite get it. Western
Yes.
scholars don't get it. It's in the spirit, and it's in the spirit not only of the state, of the living state. It's also when people die in North India. I remember having seen it myself. When the body is being taken down the streets, what people chant is Ram
Ram
Nam
Nam
Sat
Satya.
Hai, Ram
Satya
Nam
hai.
Sat Hai, because the
Yes.
only reality is this reality. So extremely important, which people in India or Western observers don't get, or Westernized Indians don't get. They're looking at it through
Yes.
the
The
Western lens
Western.
that, well, he's just a king. So why all this big deal? That's not the idea at all.
They also not just that after all human, or he's, that is not the only criticism that is flung at Bhagwan Ram, but also there are people who sit on judgment about his actions, like with respect to Sita Mata. Oh, how could he have done this? So therefore, he's a flawed man. He's a chauvinistic man. He doesn't deserve our respect. These kind of conversations have come up recently in recent times as well. You'd be surprised to know. What would you say to something like that?
Well, it's a complicated story, not in Valmiki's Ramayana, right?
Yes,
That is later on
later on. Yes.
in other Ramayans. So that's one side to it. The other side is uh,
Oh, even
something
the
which,
Agni Pariksha,
right, but I'm not sure whether that's in Valmiki's Ramayana.
that's not in Valmiki Ramayana.
Probably not, to the best of my memory. But the whole idea, again, which is very subtle, is that life um, consists of contradictions or oppositions. If it were all straightforward according to prescriptions, then it won't be all that different from a robot, an AI machine. See,
Right.
in life, you embrace opposites. Even in individual love, in love itself, there is the emotion of letting go. Because if you don't let go, then it's not true love, then it's perhaps demonic love.
Right.
So people don't quite get it that these oppositions is what Sanatan Dharma tries to teach people. And if we also embrace that last part of Agni Pariksha, etc., perhaps it's to highlight these oppositions that look, you have to let go. It's like, you look at Shiva. Shiva also drinks the poison, the
Poison.
halahal poison, right? That's why his neck is blue,
Neelakant.
right? Nilakant. So these oppositions, that life itself comes with death, which is hidden away in the core of your heart, and you have to balance these oppositions, because otherwise it's too mechanical. And that's where the West has failed or is failing. And that's why the West is also striving to try to understand this extraordinary tradition of wisdom, of extremely subtle wisdom.
This brings me, takes me back to what you just said earlier, and you also mentioned in your book, Eternal Bharat, which we will talk about shortly. In the opening introduction, you talk about, like you said, the four purusharthas, right, which is so intrinsic to our core belief system. The four purusharthas of a human being. And you say, if I recall the words correctly, you say that while Kama and Artha are the rivers, are like the river of life, Dharma and Moksha are like the banks. That's a beautiful, I think, image that captures. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's, I think, pertinent to what you just said about opposition, right? Or am I? I mean, is it okay to conflate these two things?
Yeah, Pujita, absolutely right. What Bharat is all about is truly celebrating life. And what is life about? Well, artha, you want to go out, you have ambition, you have desire, you want to fulfill desire. But within the guardrails of dharma, which is morality, and moksha, which is freedom, which means lack of attachment. Moksha is not only upon death, moksha is in life itself. Because otherwise, if you are not able to find that core of freedom within yourself, then you are totally governed by your own past history. And that's where karma comes in. Karma means reaction. Ordinarily, we keep on reacting based on how we have been raised and culture and conditioning, etc. But you're not being free then, right? So freedom comes in from something which is hidden within ourselves, which, in order to reach at, transforms you. See, without that, without finding that freedom, we are like Pashu. And in fact, there is a wonderful passage in the Shaivite tradition that without cutting the pashas or the strings
It's
which
true.
tie you to your past, you are a Pashu. But once you cut these strings, then you become one with Pashupati, because the
Wow.
Lord of the Pashus is Shiva. Shiva means consciousness. Even in the Bhagavad
Consciousness.
Gita, in 15.15, Krishna says that I am the Maheshwara within each individual. Maheshwara is the Shiva or Ishvara within each individual. So the name for consciousness is Shiva, and that's what gives us the freedom to be who we are supposed to be. Because if you don't find that freedom, then we are like Pashu. So from
Fantastic.
Pashutva to Prabhutva. Prabhutva is when you are truly free, then you
Right.
are Shivoham. You can say Aham
I
Shivaha.
am
I am like
Aham.
Shiva. Right. Yeah.
Interestingly, Pasha, isn't it similar to the, the meaning is also news, right? The news.
Sure, sure. Those are the those are the
News.
strings or the nooses which bind us to externality over which we
Exactly.
have no control. So
Right.
we are prisoners, right? We have no
Mm,
freedom. So what Sanatan Dharma is all about ultimately is about freedom. And people don't quite
mm,
get that. People think, well, all that we are doing is all these celebrations or, ritual or this or that. That is only sacred theater for us
mm.
to be able to find that freedom within us, right?
Wow.
And you can do it in so many different ways. Because another way of looking at Sanatana Dharma is that it's yoga.
Mm,
You have five, six darshanas, or if you even include Vyakaran, so
mm.
seven darshanas, and six of them are analysis. The seventh is yoga. Yoga is about how to live life.
Right.
So Sanatan Dharma is yoga. And
Mm,
what is the greatest book of yoga? It is the Bhagavad Gita. And yoga is universal. Sanatan Dharma is universal. It's eternal. It is
mm.
Shashvat. Because it's eternal, it doesn't belong to any specific time and space.
That's right.
And it's universal. Everybody
Mm,
is equal in this, no matter which part of the universe we come from, which part of the world we come from. And the Ram Mandir is one of the great symbols of it because it
mm.
transcends all these oppositions in the personhood of the Prince
Yeah.
Rama,
No.
right? And the whole world ought to be celebrating it. And in many
Exactly.
ways, there's a great clip which has gone viral on the internet of this German singer
Mm.
singing a bhajan to Rama, and I think
Yes.
that's very
Yes.
appropriate.
Also, for an African couple, I don't know if you've seen this video. There is a video that's going around on social media of, especially on Twitter, of this African. Well, they seem to be dressed in a tribal fashion in some part of Africa. I forget which country, but they're singing and swaying to this very lilting tune dedicated to Lord Ram. So there is a lot of surprisingly from unexpected quarters there is, but then there's also equal amount of clamor about why, and that it kind of represents. I'm sure you're familiar with the articles that have been coming out in Time magazine, and I think there's an article that came out by Audrey Truschke recently, just on this subject. So the proposition being that one is that it represents Hindu supremacy, and the second is, which other lot of other people say, well, the criticism being that do we even need a Ram Mandir? Why a mandir? Why a mandir? So, Subhashji, you've written about in your book, Eternal Bharat, you also talk about it at some length, what the temple is and what it represents and why it is, it has a certain significance, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about, on the criticism, like what is being said, and then perhaps bring us to what you talk about in your book about the significance of the temple itself, the mandir and its design.
As to the criticism, there are a lot of well-meaning people who don't quite understand what Sanatan Dharma is all about. If you think that Sanatan Dharma is sectarian, like many other tribal traditions, in a tribal tradition, you either belong to the tribe or you don't. If you don't
That's right.
belong to the tribe, then maybe you ought to be killed. That's what tribal traditions are. Then you're a non-believer, you ought to be killed, or you ought to be enslaved. Sanatan Dharma is not a tribal religion. Sanatan Dharma is a wisdom tradition related to every human being. It's a universal tradition. That's why it is Sanatan. That's why it's eternal, right? It doesn't say that, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you worshipping X, Y, or Z? Or why is your personal sadhana or yoga of this kind or that kind? So long as you are within the bounds of morality, because morality is universal. Morality means that you must protect others, you must be respectful to others, which is universal. If this is supremacist, that's a wonderful supremacy. A supremacy of universalism ought to be there. I,
Right.
I would embrace it. It's like the supremacy of science. Who wouldn't say that supremacy of science is not a good thing because we
Right.
must follow science. So,
Correct.
Sanatan Dharma is science which embraces not only the outer but also the inner. Now, you might
Mhm.
say, why do we believe the inner? There is nothing but the inner, there is only the outer. And a lot of people, some people in the West who are searching, don't recognize the inner. And for this criticism coming from them can be understandable.
Mhm.
But, fortunately, something that has happened recently. First of all, if you go back to science, you look at quantum mechanics, which is the deepest physics science that we have, it
Yes.
also recognizes consciousness as the other. Consciousness
Mhm.
cannot be reduced to materiality. So there
Mhm.
is an inner, right? There is an outer and there is an inner. And
Inner.
Sanatan Dharma speaks of both. Maybe some other traditions don't speak of others, speak of both. They are mainly focused on the outer, do this, do that, and then you go to paradise in your body, or you can imagine that you're
Correct.
going in your body, right? Now, fortunately, just a couple of months ago, I stumbled upon a new theorem which is published in the leading journal in the world that we have on the field. It's called Journal of Artificial Intelligence and Consciousness, where I have been able to show mathematically
Mhm.
that consciousness is not material,
Is
which
not
completely is not material. It cannot
material.
be a product of the brain, because that is what the Sanatan Dharma view is. What is Sanatan Dharma view? That Atma is not a part of the body. That is what Krishna teaches, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, or if you read the Upanishads, right? Atma is the same Atma in every person or every
Yes.
prani, in every living being. Now, the brain is like an instrument, like you have a television receiver or you have your telephone, right? But the image, it does not come from the telephone. The
Mm.
image does not come from the television. The image
Correct.
is all over, right?
That's
So
right.
Atma is all over.
Mm.
And that, so I'm very, very pleased that I've been able to find a mathematical proof for it, which proves Vedanta mathematically, which, of course, if you wanted to follow traditional arguments, you had to go to the Brahma Sutras, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and that's the case that's made in all of those texts. So to come back to what you're saying, I think to accept the supremacy of a universal view of reality, which puts every human being, male or female, of every part, corner of the world, of every culture, including other living beings, on the same pedestal, we should all celebrate it.
That's
I
right.
think that supremacy we should embrace.
Embrace. Yeah. And Subhashji, about the temple itself, there are these questions about, oh, it's seemingly as though the very structure is irrelevant into that seems to be the supposition, right? That I'm talking from the point of view of the other side, that a temple, well, what purpose does it serve? That seems to be their thought process.
Okay, I can see this criticism as something very from a naive perspective, naivete, from naivete. And in
Right.
fact, where does this criticism come from? It's like saying, why should one even have anything sacred? Why should one even worship? After
Exactly.
all, you live, we are material bodies, you eat, you sleep, and you do your work. So why
Right.
should be any need for it? Well,
That's
there
right.
is need. I'll tell you why. The need is for one to discover something which is most hidden, which is within each one of us. This
Mm.
Atman or consciousness is within each one of us. We take it for granted, and that's why we don't recognize it. We don't see its power within ourselves. So why do you need worship? Is to get inspired. Why do you
Mm.
need music? You might say, well, music is all noise of some kind. There's no
Right.
speech in it. We should only be speaking prose all the time, Shakespearean or whatever else.
Right.
We should always talk to each other, and
Something that makes sense. Yeah.
there's no need for anything else, right?
Anything
Music
else.
doesn't speak to us in
Yes.
language, right? So the answer is that there is something beyond language that's called
Mm.
para. You have you have avidya, which is normal knowledge in ordinary language, and then there is vidya, which is transcendent uh, knowledge, right? So likewise, there is ordinary speech, and then there is something more, and it's for something more that you go to poetry. Why do you go to poetry? You
Yeah.
might also say, well, we should only have prose. We should always be strict, absolutely speaking in perfect grammar. Why do you
Functional.
need poetry? We should not break any rules at all.
Yes.
Poets break rules, right? Or why do you need anything else? Why do you need theater or
Art.
movies or
Yeah.
art or whatever else? You need all of them for inspiration, because we forget who we are in the humdrum events of our daily life, right? We get so absorbed, and that's perfectly natural for us to get absorbed. So, in order to wake up from our ordinary state, which occupies most of our life, most of our daily life, you need something inspirational.
That's
And for
right.
that, you go to art. The Vedic traditions speak of 64 kalas, 64 arts, right? And and then you go to sacred places. You do pilgrimage. You do yatra. Because why do you do yatra? Because in yatra, your personhood gets dissolved because you are a part of a huge throng. Everybody becomes anonymous. So that's like a yajna. See,
Yes.
what is the idea of a sacrifice or a yajna? You might even say, hey, why have any ritual at all? The
Correct.
ritual is again to get inspired. That is sacred theater. So you're doing it early morning. It's cold, and you have the perfume. The you have the dhoop, and you have the bell, and you're seeing the fire. So all of
The
that
lamp.
separates from your ordinary modes of experience, and that's when you can sort of have an epiphany. You can, so to speak, get awakened into your true self. So, all of this, including great temples, which were in the form of the transcendent self, the imagined body of the deity. That was the idea of the temple,
Right.
right? So it's for inspiration. And I think we do need sacred spaces. It's like, even for the state, you need special spaces. You need the Parliament House, or you need some other large symbols. Now that's for the outer part, the outer part, which is, of course, a very important part of our lives. But for the inner one, again, you need other sacred spaces which are consecrated, right? Where we are not worshiping a rock. This rock is infused with prana, with breath, through the chants, because a special power has been sort of placed into it through this ritual, which is so ancient, right?
That's right.
And so it comes to have a very special significance, and so it doesn't become a rock, because Hindus in Sanatan Dharma, you don't worship rocks. You worship the transcendent, because the transcendent is without form. The Atman is Brahman, right? I am Atma Brahma, for example, is one of the Mahavakyas in the Upanishads. So this Atman, which is beyond form, comes to have form because our senses need to be connected to a form, right, in order to for focus. And that form is what, after Pran Pratishtha, that image, that Vigraha comes to have.
Okay, so now that Ram Mandir is one of the main points of, one of the main, shall we say, the man which was a mandate of the BJP party. There's a lot of also, I wouldn't say demand, but there's kind of like an implied sentiment that similar efforts be applied to Kashi and Mathura. Um, so, would you care to share your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe the temple at Kashi and the temple at Mathura are under a court's
Yes.
examination. But from what I know, you go to Kashi and you find that certainly that was the earlier Vishwanath temple. Part of it is the original, the part of the mosque is the part of the temple. And so it's quite
Mm.
clear that that was a political act by
Yes.
Aurangzeb. So it's a political act. Political act require political resolution as well.
Mm.
And of course, legal if that can be done. And the Mathura one as well. Mathura one is even more interesting. The Mathura
Mm.
property belonged to the Hindus and
Mm.
to the king, or there was a certain deed of for which
Yes.
the entire history is known. And I believe in the 1960s, late 1960s, some association was formed which
Mm.
went against the actual ownership, and they
Right.
made a deal with the Eidgah and gave
Mm.
a part of that land to the Eidgah, which was totally
Mm.
unlawful. So I think
Mm.
if something unlawful happened, that ought to be corrected. So I think
Mm.
from a legal perspective, as an outsider, from what I
Mm.
know of it, it should be given to the Mathura, Krishna Janmabhoomi
Right.
trust, because it really belongs to it. It's absolutely clear. And likewise, the
Mm.
Kashi thing is absolutely clear. There was a
It's all,
great
yeah.
temple, and I think another point that needs to be made, which has not been made as often as possible. Uh, Bharat, as a civilization of knowledge, has some symbols which belong not just to so called Hindus, they belong to the whole universe, because
Mm.
these are universal symbols. And Shiva is the symbol of consciousness. Every
Mm.
person, no matter what their personal faith might be, has that consciousness.
Mm.
I think every human being should celebrate it. And,
That's
and
right.
likewise, Krishna represents this wisdom, this person uh, who plays the flute, which is the spirit within each one of us. That's why
Mm.
Krishna dances with the gopis
Yes.
simultaneously, because it's the same Atman which is able to dance with each one of us. I think these are beautiful, poetic, and deep wisdom images that
Mm.
the whole world ought to be celebrating. And I would say that that is increasingly happening. In fact, I watched a very moving story of somebody from Australia, some cricketer. Uh, After he passed away, he wanted his ashes to be immersed in the Ganga at Banaras. Now, this was an Australian guy,
Oh,
and I think one of the old Australian captains came with the
gotcha.
ashes to do that. Why? Because truly anybody who wishes to know about our own individual mystery, each one of us,
Mm.
we must question. And that
Yeah.
questioning takes us to what the heart of Sanatan Dharma is. What is Sanatan Dharma ultimately? It's not supremacy of something, it's universal. I can't just help going back to it. It is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat
Anand.
is existence, who is Vishnu. Vish from the pervader, pervades all of existence, that is Vishnu. Chit from our
Conscious.
consciousness, who's Shiva. And Ananda, the capacity that we have to know what that mystery is, which is the
Mm.
goddess, because reality, our nature itself is the goddess. So
Mm.
Vishnu, Shiva, and the goddess, they
Devi.
are universal
Mm.
symbols. And I think just because we have not made an effort in the past,
Mm.
a few centuries, we became a bit diffident. Our political situation was bad. We said, okay, this night shall also pass. And what is happening tomorrow is the passing of that night, the dawn
Mm.
of a new age, of an
That's right.
age which embraces every human being and also has within it the potential to treat other animals with compassion, which is what we ought to
Mm.
do. All other animals with compassion as well.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Ram temple consecration tomorrow, in my view, is
Mm.
even more significant because Ram
Mm.
is the symbol of the coming together of these two inner and outer aspects of existence. And um, and in this day and age, when people are going to be fighting because of com- com- complexities that are going to come all over the world, AI age, jobs will disappear, populations will collapse. I think that is when people will ask these questions. It won't be enough, hey, I'm doing this just because my forefathers did it. Well, I want to find out what I'm all about. I can't just, have watch movies or television the entire day and eat pizza and have gummies. There ought to be something more significant in my
Correct.
life.
Then
I think
just
people are
this.
going to be asking that.
True, true. So, Subhashi, let's talk about your upcoming books, the two books which are in the pipeline. They're already out or up to be, are they in the market right now? Or?
Okay, well, about my books, I had one which came out a few months ago called The Idea of
Okay.
India. And
Yes.
so this is a kind of a trilogy. The second one, the proofs are done. I think it should be out next month. And it's called Eternal Bharat. And the subtitle is Truth, Meaning, and Beauty, which is what I just talked about. So it's an
Mm-hmm.
idea, the very heart of what Sanatana Dharma is, from the perspective of not only philosophy, but also in terms of music and architecture,
Yes.
and there's a chapter on the great Kailasa temple of Ellora.
Yes.
So that as well. And the third book, or the second book in 2024, is titled Whispers from
Whispers.
the Past, Art and Wisdom of Kashmir. As a Kashmiri, I felt very strongly that we ought to have at least one book where all these threads are to be found at one place. So that will be out, I think, in May. That's what the publisher tells me.
We spoke when your first book, the first Idea of India, came out. I think last year, a few
Right,
months.
right,
I think it
right,
was about a year ago,
right.
and so it's good to see that the whole trilogy has come together. And I had the good fortune to go through. Your two other books that you just mentioned. So I thought it would be nice to talk a little bit about these two books because I was quite, I mean, I haven't been able to complete them, but just going through it, I think these books are very, very important because you have managed to, uh, because there is so much that you're taking on in both these books. It's, I'm sure, virtually impossible to put everything together in one book, in one volume. So in the book Eternal Bharat, you attempt to, or you focus on certain aspects of Bharat which make Bharat what it is, and you speak of four Vedas, four Upanishads. Pardon me, Kena, Isha, Katha, and Mandukya. Am I right? These are the four
Right.
Upanishads. Why did you pick these four in particular to dwell on?
Two reasons. One, they are sort of short Upanishads, right? And they are a good entry point into the whole Upanishadic or the Vedic tradition. Good entry point. For myself, what changed my life, if one may say so, was that I was a teenager and I read Kathopanishad. This whole dramatic story of this young boy watching his father do this ritual, but only do it to the letter, giving away. When at the end of the ritual, he had to give the gifts to all the people who had participated. He was giving useless cows who had stopped giving milk.
Right.
So he could say that I gave away so many cows. So the
Yeah.
son asks his father, Nachiketa, he says, "Who are you going to give me away to?" And the
Me
father
away.
ignores him. He says it again. Father ignores him again. Impudent son. But then when he says it the third time, then he says, "I give you to Yama, to death." Such an electrifying story, even from an aesthetic perspective. And there is huge wisdom here. Yama ultimately is everybody's teacher. So of course Nachiketa goes to Yama. Yama is not there, for 3 nights. And when he comes back, he apologizes. He says, because I had kept you waiting for 3 nights, so I give you three boons. And one of the boons that Nachiketa asks him about is that what happens after death? What is
After
life
that.
all about? Right? Amazing, amazing. So ultimately, what the Vedas talk about through the various Upanishads is this subtle idea that life is not what appears to be on the surface. It is what it appears to be on the surface. That is certainly true. You're not to run away from your embodied life. We are also bodies. So we must do whatever needs to be done, fall in love, romance, this or that, work, whatever. That is absolutely fundamental. But there is also something more. And so, what the Vedas steer us is towards this beautiful other world which is within each one of us, right? And that world, um, in a rather paradoxical way, the doorway is Yama. Yama also means the dual. You have life, and the dual to life is Yama, which is death, or it is the doorway which um, opens vistas of understanding, right? And now you might say, poetically, you might say, how does that happen? Um, when is a when is a person most alive? A person is most alive perhaps when a person is in love, for example, right? Because that's when, okay, you can't sleep, you can't do this, you don't know why you are doing what is wrong with you. Second is when you're on the battlefield. When you're in the battlefield, you could die any moment. That's when you are one with death. Both. In fact, a good friend of mine, he wrote something very moving the other day. He says he was a teenager and he went on this Sabrimala pilgrimage. And
Right.
so when he went there and he saw the Murti, something happened to him. He felt he wanted to die. It was so transcendent feeling, so wonderful feeling that and everything was good, fulfilled. So this is what happens when you find yourself one on one with the Atman within you, with the Shiva within you, or if you want to picture the goddess within you, or whosoever, right? Then you left this plane and you are in another domain, and that domain is beyond time. And that is the reason why this person could say that, well, I life, it wasn't, nothing was meant and more in a positive sense, not in a negative sense, that one had transcended the normal limits that surround our normal experience. So Yama is the teacher. On the battlefield, you have to be prepared to die any moment. So you live
Yes.
in that particular moment. That's when you're alive. Because normally we're not alive. When we think we are
Yes.
alive, we are actually dead. Let me explain this. When we think we are alive, we are either absorbed in the past or thinking about the future, right? You're completely governed by the thoughts that go through your mind. So you follow one to the other. It's like, you're surfing the net. You're going from one place to another, to another, to another. So you're only observing, you're not alive, right? But on the battlefield, because you could be killed any moment, all your
Not thinking
senses
about the
are
future.
awake. You have to be in that
Yes.
particular moment.
In the
And
present.
so, not being ordinarily alive, you become alive. And not to be ordinarily alive, that doorway is opened by Yama. So that is where Kathopanishad comes in, or Isha Upanishad.
Wow.
It tells you, one of the most beautiful lines in Isha Upanishad is Andham tamaha pravishanti ye avidyam upasate. Into blind
Right.
darkness enter those who worship avidya. Avidya means sciences of
But
materiality.
materiality.
Yeah, materiality or physical body, into blind darkness. Tato bhuyo ivte tamo yo vidyayam rataha, into greater darkness for those
Yes.
who are absorbed only in vidya,
Only
in
in Vidya.
consciousness. So it's neither this nor that.
Mm.
Life is a dance between this and the other, right? That's like Shiva's dance. Between life and death, there is a that razor's edge, which is
Yes.
again what Kathopanishad speaks about. That the
Mm.
correct way of life is that razor's edge between
Mm.
being and becoming. Being
Becoming.
is who you think we are, with our all
Mm.
embodiment, our relationships, our hopes and dreams is being.
Mm.
Becoming is what where we are aspiring to go,
Mm.
but you can't go there because you're not there
Mm.
yet. So we
Yet.
are suspended between these two. And
Mm.
the Upanishads are all the wisdom which carries you from your being, from your body, to this
To
infinite
becoming.
potential which is there for
Mm.
each one to aspire to, because you can
Aspire to.
actually reach it, because that potential is freedom. That is what
Mm.
mukti is. That's what
Mm.
moksha is, and each one of us can reach it. But that's a dance. And that,
Mm.
so I thought that these four Upanishads, so we spoke about Isha, and we spoke about
Katha.
Kathopanishad. What Kane
Man.
Upanishad says is,
Then.
what Kane is, all these questions. And what Kane says, that he who thinks he knows does not know it. He who knows that he knows it not, he knows it. Now, what does it really mean? If you think you know it, it's your ego saying that you know it, which means that you're only speaking about the outer world. And if you're speaking only about the outer world, you don't really know it,
We don't know
because
it.
the outer world is only one half of the picture, right? But if you know where your outer experience stops, that's when you have the potential, the hope to also get to know the self within. And Mandukya Upanishad is one of the most subtle Upanishads. Mandukya Upanishad speaks about four states of awareness. The Jagrat, which is our
Jagrat.
awake state, the
Sushupti.
Swapna, which is dream space, the Sushupti, which is deep sleep, and then finally Turiya with the fourth,
Turiya.
which transcends these. Now, now the whole thing, there's something absolutely fascinating. In the ordinary state of awareness, we know what reality is like, and of course, sometimes we daydream as well. But ordinarily, um, we can conceive of reality as we see it, and as we have seen it up to this point in our life. But if that is what consciousness is, and this is generally the view in Western science, that consciousness is the activity inside your brain, right? So, ordinary Western science does not accept this idea of Atman, which is transcendent.
Right.
Now they should, because of my theorem, right? As I
Yes.
told you, because
Yeah,
you
formula.
can't fight math. But now, okay, let's grant you all of this. But then,
Mm.
how can you answer what happens in your dream? In
Mm.
your dream, you can even fly, or you can
Yes.
imagine yourself in landscapes which you have never experienced. Where does this come from? Right? So, this means that the ordinary idea of what consciousness is, of our daytime consciousness, is limited. And in fact, all originality, all creativity comes from states which are akin to the dream state. Because our ordinary experience is like you are inside the box, but creativity does not come from inside the box. You have to get out of the box, right? And that's what in the Upanishads is called Hiranya Garbha, the golden womb. There is a Hiranyagarbha Sukta also. That is where creativity comes in from. And a lot of the sadhana, the kalas, are for you to be able to step out of your normal experience into the Hiranyagarbha, which is when the goddess grants you boons or gives you gifts. It's like the great Srinivas Ramanujan. He would wake up and he would write that equation. and mathematicians are still working on his notebooks. He died at the age
Correct.
of 32 or 33
Yes.
in
Yes.
1917, I believe. And
Mm.
his notebooks were discovered in the 1970s. They're still working on it. And when he was, as you know, he was a self-taught mathematician. When he
Mm.
went to Cambridge, his collaborator, G.H. Hardy, who was a
Mm.
famous professor of mathematics, would ask him, "Hey, where did you get this equation from?" And Ramanujan would say, "I really don't know. The goddess Namagiri gave it to me in my
Yeah.
dream." Right? So I think that's why I picked Mandukya Upanishad. It talks
Mm.
about the world of
Yeah.
dreams, and
Dreams.
it's a pathway. It tells you that here, if you, of course, it's very brief. I think it's only 12 verses or something, but I did some analysis in the intro, and I
Mm.
discussed that at length in one of the chapters in this
Yes.
book, Eternal Bharat.
Yes. Um, and also in the book, you speak a lot about numbers. There is like in each of the chapters to do with music, in dance, and then astronomy and related areas, architecture, for example. You dwell on the spiritual significance of numbers, which is which is also a cornerstone of the Sanatan Dharma. Could you just give an example or how it plays on the what is the significance of these numbers?
See, the whole idea in Sanatan Dharma is that this body itself is in the image of the cosmos. That
Mm.
Pinda and Brahmanda, the
Mm.
cosmos and the cell, are mirrors of each other.
Right.
Now, the mandir is also a mirror of the cosmos, of the cosmic body, so to speak. That's why, for example, the great South Indian temples, when you enter the Gopuram, where the feet
Feet.
of the deity, and then you're entering to the very heart of the deity. So this the whole temple complex is in the image of the Purusha, right? Purusha, or in the deity, the Sagun Purusha is the deity. Now, one of the great correspondences which the Vedic rishis discovered was that, look, the sun and the moon are 108 times their diameter from the earth. And
Mm.
modern astronomy also tells us that the diameter of the sun is 108 times the diameter of the earth. So they
Oh.
made 108 a cornerstone of the temple design. They To the Garbhagriha, from the entrance are 54 steps. 54 is half of 108. And
108.
the perimeter of the temple complex is 180. So there
Oh.
are certain symmetries to this, right? And and so that's where the numbers come in from. Or you have 108 karanas in Bharatanatyam. The dance of Nataraja has 108 poses.
Poses.
Yeah, which are like the steps, the steps from the sun to the moon. The sun is the inner sun, the inner lamp of consciousness, and the earth is your body. So the 108 dances in your sadhana, you are making a journey through each of those karanas. You are covering one
Coming
step.
to.
Yeah,
Oh.
and so you go to the very heart of your being, which is where Ishvara is situated. So this is, and then if you wanted to do it outside, now you do it either through the Japamala or
Right.
your mantras, you're speaking mantras, etc., or you want to do it in the outer domain. So there are 108 great temples to Vishnu. So then you want to, in your life, you say, okay, I'm going to do the a pilgrimage to all these temples. So the whole idea was that, look, life should be about your physical life, your relationships, your family, your community, but it should also be something greater. And that's where uh, your personal kala, your sadhana, your dance, your music, your if you're a sculptor, whatever your practice is, that's where that comes in. Or you are a karma yogi. You just want to serve. That's also a great path, as the
Krishna.
Bhagavad Gita tells us, as Krishna
Yes.
informs us. So that, or now you want to uh, imbibe this in your life, you want to actually do tirthasanas. In America also, until recently, when Americans lived perhaps in greater harmony with nature, when a person retired, people used to retire maybe at 60 or 65. Most people would then buy a camper, and then they would go and travel through the entire country in the camper
Yes.
over a year or two and visit national parks, because
Mm.
national parks are also sacred spaces. That's where you can see prakriti in its most
Yes.
natural
Christine.
form.
Yeah.
So likewise, this was a part of the cycle of life, that at a certain point in life you went on pilgrimages. Yatra was extremely important. So you went to the 108 great temples to Vishnu, or you did the 12 Jyotirlingas, or you did
Ji.
this or that, or the temples of the goddess. So everything was made possible for you to incorporate in your life based on your temperament. Now, somebody didn't want to do that. That's fine too. That's also a part of Sanatan Dharma. You don't have to necessarily follow any of this ritual,
Right.
and
Right.
that's also a part of Sanatan Dharma. You want to be a mauna, you want to be muni, you don't want to speak, or you don't want to indulge in conversation, because you are already part of a conversation which is outside, or which is beyond ordinary speech, which is fine too. Beautiful, isn't it? It's extraordinary.
It is. Muni, Mount. It just struck me that Muni comes from being Maun,
Of
quiet.
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they just kept, the Munis kept quiet. They said,
Quiet.
talk, conversation is cheap. Conversation is useless. We don't want to
Yes.
talk to anybody.
Talk
What are
is
you going to
cheap.
teach? Yeah.
Right. Um, so, this second book, it whispers from the past, is I guess kind of perhaps closer to your heart, I would guess, because it's about Kashmir, and you're a Kashmiri yourself. So also this is kind of, I guess, also kind of coincides. Maybe we've missed the timeline time a little bit, but this year is, I think January was, it marks the, 34 years since the genocide happened in Kashmir in 1990. So how do you feel, before we talk about the book, what do you feel about, but I don't think we need to talk about what happened. But do you think, now, are you hopeful for the future? Do you think we can get Kashmir back to, or Kashmir can go back to what it was perhaps in your childhood, or even if we were to be that ambitious, how you describe it in your book, when Kashmir was at its pinnacle of beauty in every sense, there were such great philosophers and poets who came from that land. So, what do you think? I mean, is enough being done to take it back to where it was?
I am a very positive person. I'm an optimist. I think um, we are hope in the after at the worst of times, when you have the greatest storm, that's when you can start dreaming of the calm after the storm. I think, who was it, maybe Keats or Shelley, who says, after night or winter is when you can start dreaming of the
Yes.
spring. So
Yes.
we might be in the winter, or maybe the winter is ending tomorrow. Perhaps Ram temple is important at so many different levels, right? So okay, it's horrible what Kashmiris went through. One of the great tragedies of modern times, that people who had lived in their ancestral homes for generations, they had to leave just in days, and never have gone back. And some of them have gone back now to look at their abandoned buildings. But really, what happened was absolutely unprecedented, because
Yeah.
even the Yazidis who went through, whose sufferings were probably worse, so many people taken into sex slavery, so
Yes.
many murdered, but at least they've gone back to their Sinjar, that town where they are from. Kashmiris haven't yet done it, but I'm hopeful, and I'll tell you why I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because the whole world has reached a point where it's become ready to appreciate what Sanatan Dharma is actually about. Sanatan Dharma is not what the West painted it to be. Something about caste or hierarchy, about
Yes.
oppression. But that's how they said, okay, this is what it is, and we hate you, we hate
Mm.
it, and we want to eradicate it, as some
Yes.
ministers in Tamil Nadu have been doing recently, right? They go to
Yeah.
these conferences that
Sanatan Dharma is a
eradicating Sanatan Dharma,
yeah,
right?
disease.
So you can always set up a straw man and say that this is what Sanatan Dharma is. We want to destroy it. But truly, what Sanatana Dharma is, the pinnacle of wisdom and science. Science of the outer completely embraces all of those sciences, and science of the inner, which is what Vidya is. A Vidya and Vidya together, right? As the whole world appreciates it and realizes that Shiva belongs to everybody. Sanatan is the universal way. Now, of course, we must also say it's our way because somebody has to take care of it. But it's really, if you think of it, it's the universal way, right? So, as people realize it, they, in my view, will come back to it. And when they come back to it, Kashmir would once again be a wonderful place. Now, I think symbolically, I would urge the government in India to do two things. One is to renovate the Martanda temple, the great temple
Yes.
which
Sun,
was
Sun
made by
Temple.
Lalitaditya. And as you know, Lalitaditya was a world conqueror. He conquered most of India as well as Central Asia as well. So, and then Martand, as the great Surya temple,
Sun Temple.
again
Yes.
belongs to the whole universe, not
Yes.
just Kashmir and Bharat. So we must do it. Symbolic, great symbolic value to it. The other thing that Bharat needs to do is to uh, use whatever leverage it has or create leverage to rehabilitate the great Sharda temple.
China.
Sadly, what happened in 1948, the Indian army stopped just 9 kilometers
Bef-
to the east of the Sharda temple. So, what we need to go to do is to tell Pakistan that, look, we want this great temple, because this was one of the two great temples of
Yes.
North India, west of Banaras or Kashi. One was Takshashila, the other was Sharda temple. And as you know, Adi Shankaracharya
Addition.
came to Sharda temple.
Yes.
Ramanujacharya also came to Sharda temple. So
Oh.
it's got great significance. And why did they come there? Because the pundits there were of such scholarship that each of them wanted to come there and you know convince that these guys that,
Exchange.
look,
Yeah.
what, absolutely. So I think once that is symbolically done, that would create ripples of grace, of good cheer for everybody, not just Hindus, but everybody who lives in Bharat,
Everybody. Yeah. Yeah.
Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and everybody, because Sanatan Dharma is all embracing. As this young fellow, young Swami, or not, he's not a Swami, Acharya in Madhya Pradesh, who's become very popular recently, Dhirendra Shastri
Ah.
says, Sanatan Dharma is for everybody.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can have your own, you can have your own mazhab, have your
Yes.
own religion, but
From
Sanatan
Chhattisgarh,
is
I think
universal.
he's from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right, right. No, Bhageshwar Dham.
Bhageshwar Dham. Sorry. Sorry.
Right,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
right, right. So I think the time has come for us to bring this message of good cheer for everybody to everyone, and that will create ripples so that others will also be able to partake of this wisdom. And in many ways, it's unstoppable. But look at yoga. Hinduism is yoga, I say. Sanatan Dharma is yoga. Yoga is everywhere in every corner of the world. Can you believe
Today,
it?
yeah.
And you'll be surprised that in the small town that we live in, Midwest USA, there are these American women who chant Hanuman Chalisa. Can you believe it?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So this is what is happening in this world.
Wow.
And because it's not sectarian. This is what we need to focus on again and again. Sanatan Dharma is not sectarian. It's universal. It's for everybody.
To close, you just mentioned that Sanatan Dharma is for everybody, and Kashmir kind of symbolizes that. But for a lot of people, Kashmir is kind of the Kashmir idea of Kashmiriyat is Islamic, intrinsically Islamic in nature. Many people, I think, they're very ignorant and naive, and you'd be surprised. A lot of people still cling on to the belief that Kashmir is actually of the Muslims and for the Muslims, and we are the ones who are, intruders in that space. So could you leave us with some beautiful one or two examples of just how far back Sanatan Dharma goes back, how far back it goes in the land of Kashmir, uh, the connections that it has with whether it is Devi worship or with philosophy, with aesthetics. So just one or two examples and stories. You mentioned that Kashmir is a land of stories and magic. So
Yeah, Kashmir is the land of Panchatantra, for example,
yes.
and the great cycle of stories called the Katha Sarit Sagar. So all kinds of stories and told in so many different ways. And Kashmir, in Kashmiri language, is also called Reshivur, which means the Vari or Vatika of the Rishis. And in fact, after Kashmir became, or the sultans took over in Kashmir 1330s or so, um, they there was a cycle of syncretic Kashmiri Muslim teachers who were called rishis also, like
Acha.
Nanda Rishi. One of the earlier Muslim teachers was called Nanda Rishi, and so that it's true that for the Kashmiri Islam which was practiced had syncretic elements until recently, because what happened in 1990 or just before that and after was maybe something that was going on in the larger Islamic world. And sadly, Kashmir became a front in that war, because prior to that, you had the great genocide in 1971 in Bangladesh, and then you had ISIS come up,
Yes.
and you had no ISIS came after this. After that, the war came to Kashmir, and then after Kashmir in the early 2000s, you had ISIS and what it did in Iraq, to the Yazidis and to others, and that war is still going on. You look at Nigeria. Apparently, in the last 5 6 years, about 30,000 Christians have been killed by
Yes.
Boko Haram, right?
Boko Haram.
Boko Haram, as you know, Boko means book, Haram means
Haram.
it's
It's not
is haram. That books are Western books are haram. So that is
haram.
the movement. So I think Kashmir, the worship of the Devi, you have Nilmat Puran, you have other texts, or Atharva Veda, according to some scholarship. The rishis were in the hermitages around the valleys of Kashmir and Kishtwar and so on. So very, very ancient tradition. And not only that, we shouldn't forget that from Kashmir, um, the Sanatan Dharma worship in different forms was taken both to East Asia, to China, and to Japan and Korea, and to the Slavic world through Central Asia. And in fact, the chief deity of the Slavs was Svetovid, or
Swetovid.
Shvetovid, the knower of light, with four faces. Just as you have four faces of Shiva. And in fact, they have names which are Sanskritic, like Swarga and Moksha and Parjanya and Ladaha. So Kashmir has played a very, very central role in the ideas of Sanatan Dharma going off in Eurasia. and 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 there's no reason why it wouldn't do that again. We do
Mm.
need. I'm really hoping that Martanda Temple would be reconstructed, and that'll be a
Yes.
great thing, even from a tourism point of view.
Point of view. Yeah.
To enjoy the glory of that great conception. And if the Sharda Temple is redone, and I'm quite hopeful that the Pakistanis would be open to helping that reconstruction, because secretly within the heart of every Pakistani also, or if not every, maybe certainly 20, 30, 40%, is great happiness at this resurgence of India that is taking place. India
Mm.
in purchasing power parity terms is already the world's third largest economy. It's expected to
Mm.
become the second in the next 5, 10 years. So, and India's rise is unstoppable. It's expected to be the first in the next 20, 30 years.
Yes.
So the Pakistanis also take pride in it, secret pride in it. At least the Pakistanis that I know personally. And for them to know that the great center north of Takshashila, which is Sharda, why shouldn't it be reconstructed? There'll also be a source of revenue to
Mm.
them if
Yes.
there is religious tourism from all over the world. So I am extremely hopeful, positive. We have to spread the good word and do it in a respectful and positive way and embrace everybody. And
Mm.
why wouldn't people join a good party? Sanatan Dharma is a good party, right? Who doesn't want to join a good party?
Good party, yes. So Bharti, thank you so much. As usual, it was a lovely, engaging conversation and brimming with a lot of positivity. And I think in these times, we need that. We need to cling on to some ray of hope that things will get better from now on, from here on. And yes, I think the whole idea of Sanatan Dharma, there's no denying, is that it's for everybody. It is for those who understand the core belief and for those who can understand what it really stands for. And let's hope that somebody overhears this or hears this, listens to this conversation, and that your prayers and your wishes go to the right ears, and that Martand Temple and the Sharda Temple, these two temples, also see the kind of effort that is being done to Ayodhya today. So we hope that that happens very soon. And on that note, my our best wishes for your both your books, Eternal Bharat and Whispers of the Past, from the past, right? And best wishes, and we'll meet again very soon, I'm sure. Uh,
Thank you, Pooja. I really enjoyed it. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. And those who are watching, please come back for more such content. Share our content with your friends if you like it. Please like and subscribe and comment. And please keep coming back to us for more content. Namaste.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.